Picture this: America in the 1950s, a nation roaring with post-war optimism, flushed with cash, and racing toward the future. It's the age of booming suburbs, shiny new cars, and the birth of rock and roll. On the surface, everything is perfect, but beneath this glossy veneer, in the smoky, intellectual heart of New York City, a revolution was brewing, a revolution of color, emotion, and raw, unfiltered feeling. At the center of this storm was a man named Marcus Rothko, who the world would come to know as Mark Rothko. He was a giant, not just in stature, but in the art world he would come to dominate. His canvases were vast, overwhelming fields of color that didn't just hang on a wall, they breathed. They were portals to the deepest parts of the human soul: joy, despair, ecstasy, and tragedy. But the man who created these sublime experiences was locked in a silent, lifelong battle. A battle against the darkness that threatened to consume him. A struggle that the very world celebrating his genius refused to see. Before he was Rothko, the celebrated artist, was Marcus, a young Jewish immigrant who arrived in America from Russia in 1913. He carried with him the trauma of a world rife with anti-Semitic violence. He once recalled his earliest childhood memory being of a pit, where he imagined Cossacks would throw the local Jewish population. This fear, this inherited terror, became a shadow that followed him throughout his life. He was a brilliant student, winning a scholarship to Yale, a bastion of the Protestant elite. He felt like an outsider from the moment he stepped on campus, a feeling that would never truly leave him. He saw the institution as snobbish and racist, and after just 2 years, he dropped out and moved to New York City, determined to become an artist. This was his first great act of defiance, rejecting the path laid out for him to forge his own, even if it meant a life of poverty and uncertainty. The early years in New York were a struggle. He painted in relative obscurity for nearly 2 decades, taking odd jobs to survive. He taught art to children, a role he cherished, finding in their uninhibited creativity a purity he sought in his own work. During this time, his style was constantly evolving. He experimented with surrealism, drawing from mythology and ancient symbols, searching for a universal language that could express the profound anxieties of a world reeling from the Great Depression and heading toward another world war. He wasn't just painting pictures. What does it mean to be alive in a world full of suffering? How can we find meaning in chaos? By the late 1940s, something clicked. Rothko abandoned all figurative representation. He found his voice. The mythic figures and surreal landscapes dissolved, replaced by something far more elemental, shimmering, stacked rectangles of pure color. These were not just arrangements of shapes. Rothko insisted they were dramas. He wanted people to stand close, to be enveloped by the canvas, to have a direct, personal, and almost religious experience. And people did. His work began to attract serious attention. The art world, hungry for something new, something uniquely American, crowned him a king of abstract expressionism. Fame arrived like a tidal wave. Suddenly, the perpetually broke artist was a wealthy man. His paintings were selling for record sums. Museums clamored for his work. He was commissioned to create monumental murals for some of the most prestigious spaces in the world, including the Seagram Building in New York and a chapel in Houston, Texas, which would later be named the Rothko Chapel. He had achieved everything an artist could dream of. He had overcome poverty, obscurity, and the rigid expectations of his past. He had succeeded. But this success was a double-edged sword. Rothko had always been a deeply serious, often melancholic man. His friends described him as brilliant and funny, but also prone to deep bouts of depression. As his fame grew, so did his despair. He felt profoundly misunderstood. He loathed the way his paintings were being treated as mere commodities, as decorative status symbols for the wealthy. He once famously backed out of the Seagram Commission, returning the massive fee, because he couldn't stomach the idea of his paintings being background decoration for rich diners. He said, "I hope to paint something that will ruin the appetite of every son of a bitch who ever eats in that room." The pressure was immense. The art market demanded more Rothkos, but he couldn't just churn them out. Each painting was a grueling emotional journey. He would spend months, sometimes years, on a single piece, locking himself in his studio, staring at the canvas, waiting for the right emotional pitch. He was terrified of repeating himself, of his work becoming a formula. This pressure to constantly produce, to maintain his status as a leading artist, was a heavy burden. The silence of the art world on this matter was deafening. No one talked about the mental toll. An artist's suffering was romanticized, seen as a necessary part of the creative process, not as a cry for help. His inner circle of fellow artists, people like Jackson Pollock and Arshile Gorky, also battled their own demons. It was a generation of artists who poured their trauma and anxiety onto the canvas, but they had few tools to cope with it off the canvas. Heavy drinking became a common and destructive coping mechanism. Rothko's drinking escalated, and his health began to fail. He was diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm, a condition that left him physically weakened and unable to work on the large-scale canvases he was known for. He was advised to stop drinking and take it easy, but he couldn't. The darkness was closing in. His late works reflect this descent. The vibrant reds, yellows, and oranges of his most famous period gave way to somber, foreboding palettes of black, gray, and maroon. These paintings are stark, tragic, and incredibly powerful. They are the final statements of a man confronting his own mortality, a man who felt trapped by the very world that had elevated him. The light was fading. On February 25, 1970, Mark Rothko was found dead in his New York studio. He had taken his own life. The art world was shocked, but perhaps not surprised. The tragedy of Mark Rothko is not just the story of one man's struggle with mental illness. It's a damning indictment of a system that values the product over the person, that celebrates genius while ignoring the human cost. Today, Rothko's paintings sell for tens of millions of dollars. They hang in the world's most prestigious museums, and thousands of people stand before them, moved to tears by their beauty and power. But how many of them know the story of the man behind the canvas? How many understand the immense pressure and profound loneliness that fueled their creation? The billion-dollar art world continues to operate with a brutal silence around the mental health of its artists. We celebrate their work, we buy it, we trade it, but we rarely ask what it takes to create it. We rarely offer the support and understanding that could save a life. It's time to change that. It's time to pull back the curtain and talk about the reality of being an artist. The struggle, the pressure, the mental toll, it's all part of the story. By sharing these truths, we can begin to build a more compassionate and supportive community for the creators who enrich our world. Mark Rothko gave us windows into the human soul, but in the end, no one could see into his. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the lives of great artists, and share this video. Spreading this message helps us continue to tell these important stories. See you next time.